I'm Roxana Marcoci, the acting chief curator of photography at the Museum of Modern Art, and I'm here with my colleague, Caitlin Ryan. Together we have collaborated with LaToya Ruby Frazier on her survey exhibition at MoMA in 2024, Monuments of Solidarity.
I was a fellow at the Museum of Modern Art for a year. I'd been a civil rights lawyer my entire career and went to MoMA to be a fellow to begin to do some work that I'd been thinking about for a long time, trying to build stronger collaborations and a joint visioning between the people that I see as some of the most important artists on the scene at the moment and those of us who are working every day very hard on concepts of democracy, equality, citizenship, justice. During the course of being, in that fellowship, I kept hearing this name, LaToya Ruby Frazier, and the pictures of her grandmother and of her family were some of the photographs that I happened to see when I was looking through MoMA's collection. I loved those photographs. Sitting on the floor of the room with the grandma. Citizenship was there. I was looking at lots of other photographs that were about marches and that showed monuments and showed people with fists raised and police brutality and the things we tend to think of when we're thinking about civil rights or social justice but this photograph seemed to me also about those issues because it is about human dignity and about the love of family and the right of families to love each other and live in a space that is safe and where they can be healthy and where those bonds like between grandchild and grandmother that are so important in our society can develop. Obviously, at the time, her exhibit was being prepared to be shown at MoMA. I was so excited about going to see it. It was a big deal to can I walk through, and just get a feel for what this exhibit is going to be. And then the exhibit was amazing.
Prior to the exhibition, I was engaged with LaToya in 2015. I organized a forum on contemporary photography at MoMA. And one of the major topics of our conversation revolved around a piece that LaToya had made the year prior, which was on the disused Pier 54 on the Hudson River. That piece was about migrants and their difficulty in crossing borders, in having a relationship across nation states. And it was a very important piece that kind of bridged the exhibition's beginning and end. Also in 2015, MoMA acquired a number of works from LaToya's first body of work, The Notion of Family. It's a very important group of works that LaToya began in 2001 when she was still a teenager. She completed it in 2014. And interestingly, that body of work was also the first piece that you encountered when you entered the exhibition at MoMA. It was a monument to her own family, to her town of Braddock, Pennsylvania, of 3 generations of women, her grandma Ruby, her mother Cynthia, an often collaborator in this early phase of her career, and herself. And then in November of 2022, Caitlin and I co-organized a Scholars Day, where we brought LaToya in conversation with numerous other scholars to discuss, her deeply poetic, her fiercely political work. And it was on that occasion that LaToya raised a very interesting question. And that was, what would we think about a monument to workers' thoughts? And that kind of provocation that her question generated and it inspired led, in fact, to the idea of monuments of solidarity. and that each body of work that we presented in the exhibition, from the notion of family to the last cruise to the Dolores Huerta project, which kind of concluded the show, that each one of them will be a monument to the working class.
I think that as we were thinking about what a monument of solidarity might be, it was, and thinking about what it would mean to reconstrue each of these bodies of work as a monument, that it was important to us to think about this as not a monument that is kind of a commemoration, just memory, nothing static, but that this is something living and active. And so this really played a role in the exhibition strategies and the installation strategies that we developed and worked with LaToya on. So for example, as you entered into the first gallery, there was a poem, a kind of word cloud that was taken from the book version of Notion of Family. And it was the names of all of the chemicals that are invisible, that are in the air in Braddock, which is, of course, the site of Andrew Carnegie's first steel mill. And so all of these invisible chemicals that are in the air were kind of laid bare on the wall, but in this almost silvery kind of vinyl lettering, so that as you moved through the space, things came kind of in and out of visibility. And this was kind of arranged around a really incredible work from this series, a grid of 9 portraits of LaToya and her mother silhouetted behind a bed sheet. Looking at it, it starts to seem like a window through kind of the smog atmosphere. And so thinking about the ways that the text and video and the photographs could all operate together to create this monument, this kind of living space. The body of work also explores the healthcare infrastructure in Braddock and its decline and decay, and the closure of Braddock Hospital, which was the oldest community hospital operating in Braddock for more than 100 years. And when it closed in 2011, it left the entire region without this really important care provider.
One of the photographs that to this day I have chill bumps on my arm right now just thinking about it is where she shows all of the wires coming out of the building and then all of the hospital wires. You know, standalone photographs again of family and relationship, along with the photographs of these buildings, of the kind of decimation of a community, of the way in which a community can be backed up against this decimation, seems so powerful to me.
This is something that also is at the fore in the second gallery, which takes up a series of works, including a gorgeous lithograph series in which LaToya is thinking about these advertisements that the denim brand Levi's made in collaboration with the then mayor of Braddock to kind of revitalize Braddock. And she's juxtaposing this projection, this mythology of Braddock as this kind of new frontier, this place for an urban pioneer, and deconstructing that from the perspective of a contemporary citizen of Braddock, and comparing it and juxtaposing it with the closure of the hospital and the campaign to save the hospital. And the other works in the gallery all deal with Braddock, including a performance that LaToya did in front of a Levi's pop-up store here in New York, in which she systematically destroyed a denim outfit that she was clad in on the sidewalk.
The installation piece, the video around the Levi's action, that blew me away. Wow, you know, the things that artists do that allow you to tell a whole story, like chapter and verse, you know, that I would write in a 50-page brief, that had sections and references and citations, all happened in just watching her wear out those jeans on that concrete. It really spoke to the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands, the millions of working class people who wear those kinds of garments. And it was a chance to see in a small snapshot the stress, the pain, the work, the erosion that happens to them in that work. And, we have tell a lot of stories about working class people in the US that are designed to, suggest a kind of noble Americanness to those in the Rust Belt and factory towns. And we talk about this all the time, but it could just as easily be nurses working double shifts for years. It could just as easily be teachers working for 25 years in a classroom every day with 30 students in every class. It could be somebody working on an assembly line. It just spoke to all of that. It spoke to that, the erosion, the degradation, the stress, the work, the pain of doing that kind of work day in and day out, that she truncated into that performance piece. And that one, it seems to me, is kind of a classic that is for our age and should not be lost.
Before I was the executive director of the ICA at VCU, I was the department head and curator of contemporary art at the Baltimore Museum of Art. More Than Conquerors was one of my last projects at the BMA, and probably my proudest project that I've worked on. Around 2022, the fall of 2022, I was invited to participate in the Scholars Day held in honor of LaToya Ruby Frazier. And, I had heard inklings of the work in progress in Baltimore, but hadn't seen any images, or I think really during the course of the pandemic when the work was being created. At the time, my colleagues at the museum had no idea that LaToya was actually in the city and working with the community health workers. For those who have not been to the BMA, it's situated literally on Johns Hopkins campus. And to know that LaToya's collaboration with JHU clinicians and academicians and community advocates was unfolding right next door to us was incredible. So fast forward to 2023, on the heels of LaToya's work being presented formally as a part of the Carnegie International, and then in preparation for its presence in her show at Gladstone, I got a message. It was LaToya who advocated for her work to have presence in the BMA collection. And my role was really as a kind of shepherd for that process to unfold. The first step that we took was actually just jumping on a call with LaToya to understand the sort of parameters around the work from her perspective, to understand the choices that she made in the creation of the installation as a part of the Carnegie International, and to also understand, okay, where are the areas in which we can maybe deviate. Again, because we were in Baltimore, we knew very, very quickly that we had a unique opportunity to connect with the community health workers who took part in the project. We had two goals in mind. To create a sense of welcome for all of the CHWs, many of whom had not been to the BMA before, and to hear in their words their experience in the creation of the work, and also have them record their transcripts that live alongside the photographs themselves. And it was probably one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever had. Hearing Griselda Funn and Tiffany Scott and Chidima Ibe, really, I think dive into the most personal aspects of their work as community advocates, as researchers, as a lifeline to the Baltimore community. I think it's very rare in museums that folks, I think, get to tell those sort of deeply personal stories. And that period over the summer was a really productive experience for me and our team, and also for the museum, because it kind of eroded those boundaries of curator and visitor, or curator and artist, or curator and subject of a photograph. You know, even our program planning process was thinking about how, now that we have this work here, how can we galvanize action within and across the community, and really not necessarily point to the thing, but be the thing, or hold space for others' voices. And I think LaToya was so game for us really thinking about her work as a platform for change locally and advocacy locally.
LaToya in some ways is like, you know, all the artists I've worked with, in some ways is the most kind of like directly connected to the to the work that I'm doing, because the premise of the work I'm doing is that the way we evaluate the health of a democracy is by understanding how it works in the lives of those who are at the bottom or who are at the margins. We don't evaluate the health of our democracy by, you know, assessing how many millionaires we have, right? Like that's not a measure. The measure is, how does it work for the least of these? Where is it falling? And that's how we know whether the democracy is healthy or not. And so we should be in constant conversation with those who are encountering our democracy in its weakest places. So a lot of what she presents for me is that way in which the encounter that she compels us to have with people and the lives of people in communities who are living at the margins, or whose voices are not usually centered, whether they're community health workers in Baltimore or whether they are the people of Braddock, the Black people of Braddock. Those are the voices that help us understand where our democracy is weak, and therefore, from my perspective, the places where we should be trying to shore up the weaknesses of our democracy, whether it is in the context of, you know, environmental justice and development and what it does and can do to vulnerable communities, whether it is in the context of healthcare and access to healthcare for those who are most in need and most vulnerable. All of those things, when we are engaged in conversation with people who are encountering our democracy in those places, and encountering the places that our democracy is weak, where it does not offer the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where it does not undergird citizenship, where it does not ensure equal dignity for all, where the promise of equal protection falls by the wayside, where due process is not given before life, liberty, or property are interrupted. That's how we find out. And that's the place of the work.
So, in a way, the last gallery was also a monument to an extraordinary woman, Dolores Huerta, who for over half a century led an incredible fight for the rights, for civil rights, for farmers' rights, together with Cesar Chavez. She was just a formidable person. She was also a matriarch of 11 children and numerous grandchildren, many of them activists, just like her. So that installation, which was premiered at the museum, it consisted of two kind of accordion-style installations of photographs of Dolores and her children, and culminated in this extraordinary 8-foot-tall portrait of Dolores in front of a mural where she declared back then the table Grape Strikes. So it was almost like a chapel-like installation, and just like every other room, it consisted of these architectural component that transformed the photographic components, the moving image components, the text components that structured the exhibition into a specific monument for a specific group of individuals or a single one. From the interlocking of, these early bodies of works around the notion of family, we moved into this V formation, a very military formation for Flinty's family in 3 acts as a homage to the veteran who invented this extraordinary water generator that helped the community in Flint, to this planetarium-looking installation for Sandra Gould Ford, to the factory assembly line of the last cruise, to this chapel-like installation for Dolores Huerta. Every single installation was reconceived, was rethought and remade for this exhibition. And it was very interesting to me how LaToya truly became a connector and a bridge between the working class and this cultural field, how each one of her interlocutors in these photographs and in their testimonies were also extremely creative people. She always thought of them also as artists and collaborators, just not from the formalized art world. And how impressive it was to me that at the opening of the exhibition, so many of these people, whether they were participants in the, say, in the auto worker union or the farm unions or the National Association of Healthcare Unions or the steelworker unions, were present at the exhibition. It was unlike any other opening that had at the museum.
I was blown away. I think LaToya is one of the greatest artists of our time. She's going to go down in history for for really pushing the boundaries of what photography can do. She's an artist who's thinking about what it means to hold space for communities, thinking about what it means to hold space for histories of labor, to be attendant to the ways in which historical movements take place across slow time, and using her art as a vehicle to slowly unveil that as well, to bring those similarities in human history together. It's just extraordinary and exquisite.
LaToya and I were honored by the Baltimore Museum of Art. I'm a board member there, and we had a chance to talk a little bit about, some of the things she hopes to work on in the future. And I just remember hearing, the kinds of encounters that she's having. And I was just struck by the, I hate to use that word because it sounds hokey, but bravery of her journey, of where she's willing to go, of what she wants to confront, of the hard questions that she's asking, and of her kind of uncompromising vision. I just think she's a remarkable artist with a very, very long and important future, not only as an artist, but as a democracy worker with many of us who need to be linking arms with artists who are working in this way.